Authorities in Georgia are scouring through videos of a violent struggle that turned deadly outside a Wendy's in Atlanta Friday night when officials say police shot and killed 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks after he allegedly resisted arrest. Officers were called to the parking lot around 10:30 p.m. with complaints of Brooks asleep in his car blocking the drive-thru. Police claim he failed a sobriety test and that when they tried to arrest him, he resisted and was able to grab an officer's taser. In this surveillance video, you can see him running away, then appearing to point the taser at the officers.
At that point, the Atlanta officer reaches down and retrieves his weapon from his holster, discharges it, strikes Mr. Brooks there on the parking lot, and he goes down.
Today, Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields stepping down after calls for her resignation as protesters demand police reform and racial justice.
Chief Shields has offered to immediately step aside as police chief so that the city may move forward with urgency in rebuilding the trust so desperately needed throughout our communities.
Demonstrators gathering near the fast food restaurant, their rally cries even louder now.
It fueled a fire, a worse fire. We've been doing all this peaceful protesting, and in the midst of that, you guys are still killing us.
Meanwhile, cities all over the U.S. are seeing their third weekend of mass protests over the death of George Floyd. Tensions rising in places like Nashville and Seattle, where demonstrators have seized control of some areas, claiming them as autonomous zones.
We have to talk about this latest police shooting and the fact that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, we are still confronted with these exact same issues. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the African American History Museum in Baltimore, not the big one in D.C., not the Smithsonian, but the one in Baltimore. And what you saw were signs from the 1920s or photos from the 1930s with pictures on them of black people protesting police shootings of black men. As long as we have been in this nation, as long as there's been a history of African Americans or of Africans in this country, we've had to deal with the question of the extrajudicial killings of black folks and how this nation would respond. Remember, even when we were under the quote-unquote 3/5 compromise, it wasn't that we got 3/5 of the rights of a citizen. It's not that we were treated as 3/5 of a human being. We were treated as 0/5 of a human being. We were only counted as 3/5 of a human for electoral purposes to appropriate congressional seats and as far as appropriations go. We did not get 3/5 of the rights. We were never contemplated or considered to be humans. We were chattel in this country. And even once we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which theoretically gave us freedom and equality, those had absolutely no impact or import without an enforcement mechanism. This is why after the end of Reconstruction, we had the Posse Comitatus and the removal of federal troops from the South. We were put back into the same situation we were beforehand, just slavery by a different name. Jim Crow, sharecropping, segregation. It wasn't until the 1960s that we finally got the civil rights, the voting rights, public accommodation, fair housing. And that was supposed to enforce the promise of the Constitution and of our founding documents that all men were created equal. But that clearly did not work either. So here we are in 2020, halfway through the year, matter of fact, we're into the summer. We got private companies sending rocket ships into space. We have magical computers that fit into our hands and can access all the information in the history of the earth right there. We get instantaneously video chat with people from every part of the globe. We have space probes, Voyager 1 and 2, that have left our solar system and gone into interstellar space. But we are still dealing with the foundational problem of America, its original birth defect, as Condoleezza Rice has referred to it. The fact that African people in this country have never and maybe will never be treated as free and equals. Going to the case of Rayshard Brooks, the young man who was in the Wendy's parking lot, asleep in his car, supposedly drunk, and then police officers confronted him. Somebody called the cops saying somebody was asleep in their car in the parking lot. This is all regular so far. They pull the man out. They speak with him. They give him a field sobriety test. He blows into the breathalyzer. He is intoxicated. Okay, fine. So when they try to execute the arrest, he scuffles with them, grabs a taser, and runs away. Okay, he grabs the taser and runs away. And now he points the taser, and at this point he is shot in the back. Now the issue with this is fighting with a police officer is not the type of offense that results in the death penalty. We reserve the death penalty in this country for the most heinous and despicable murderers, the people who have committed the crimes which are unforgivable. We give people the death penalty for terrorism. We give serial killers the death penalty. People who abuse children are given the death penalty, not somebody who gets in a scuffle with police officers. Now, proper police protocol is, because he is running the other direction and has a non-lethal device with him, a taser, you let him run. He's drunk. He'll fall down in a couple feet. You have cars. You radio in, and you have backup units, just cut him off around the corner somewhere, and then take him into custody. You have his car there at the scene. You have his keys. You have his license. This isn't the most difficult situation. Officers are confronted with this situation all the time. So you don't even really need to chase him. You just let him run, and then he'll either tire out or another officer will pick him up. You have him on video so you know what he looks like. You've seen his ID. You're able to make a positive identification. There's no reason to escalate this situation. There was no need for lethal force in a situation of this nature. The officers clearly did not fear for their lives because they knew that the taser he had was not a lethal device. This is the equivalent of hearing a fly and shooting it with a rifle. But it's because of the continued dehumanization of African Americans in this country that even the slightest infraction is seen as deserving of the death penalty. So we need real solutions at this point. No more simple resignations, no more desk duty, no more simply firing people. How do we fix the systemic issues from a legislative standpoint to prevent these things from happening in the future? Because it's not that these things are happening more often as they seem. Rather, they are simply all being caught on video now, unlike in the past. And if we are truly going to be free, going to be equal, going to be 5/5 of a human being, that's going to take the actions of all of us to ensure that justice is served.